Mika. I just wanted to take a moment to point out how cool my new profile picture is. I got commissioned by @TheEggoMan here on YouTube. You know, the one that makes the really cool crack animations. They did so well, and I'm so lucky. But anyway. Deku, I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds not coming down. Chapter 54. A trip of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Hitoshi didn't really understand why they all had to go to the train station together, but he figured it must have something to do with liability, and making sure people didn't sue the school or something. Or maybe it was just that Aizawa didn't trust them to actually leave on time if they were left to their own devices. He could see some of the other students sleeping in and missing the train or getting lost or something, but they were hero students, so they should be better than that, right? Well, it didn't really matter, because they were all here, clustered around Aizawa as he lectured them on professionalism and politeness. Hitoshi adjusted his grip on the case from his brand new hero suit. He still hadn't gotten the chance to wear it, so he hoped it would fit correctly and looked okay. He didn't know that much about costume design, so besides the voice changer, he'd mostly left it up to the support department. As long as they didn't put him in skin-tight spandex, he'd be fine. The class scattered to their various platforms as Aizawa finished his lecture, leaving only Hitoshi and his teacher by the doors. Aizawa sighed loudly and ran a hand through his hair.
Good riddance. Nobody'd better get in trouble this week. I really don't want to have to deal with the paperwork.
He glanced down at Hitoshi, who instinctively stood a little straighter.
You ready to go?
Hitoshi nodded and fell into step behind his teacher. He was still having trouble believing that he was actually in the hero course, much less that he was interning with Eraserhead, who had been his favorite hero practically ever since he learned about him. He'd gone through a phase near the end of elementary school where he just intensely researched every hero with a quirk that could be seen as villainous, just so he could prove his bullies wrong. It hadn't really worked, because it turns out they just liked being mean, and no amount of reason and evidence was going to convince them to be nice. But it had given Hitoshi hope that his dream wasn't as impossible as it seemed, so it had still been pretty useful.
So, Shinso, how are you getting along with your classmates? Aizawa asked.
Hitoshi hadn't really pegged Eraserhead as one for small talk, but he supposed life was full of surprises. His classmates were nice, but maybe they were too nice. It just seemed like it was only a matter of time before they stopped wanting to hang out with the villain. Maybe Midoriya was the exception to the rule, considering his own quirk situation, but he still didn't trust the others. Instead of going into all of that, he just shrugged and repeated the mantra he'd had since he came to UA.
I'm not here to make friends.
Aizawa scoffed.
Yeah, good luck with that. You're planning on going underground, right?
Hitoshi nodded.
It makes the most sense with my quirk. I agree. I can think of a dozen situations off the top of my head where your quirk will come in handy. But I'm going to give you a word of advice.
He stopped walking and stared at him intensely.
I was like you early on. I was fiercely independent and thought friendships would only hold me back. But over the years, I've learned that underground heroes are a tight-knit community. We rely on each other to stay alive in ways that daylight heroes don't have to worry about. I'm not saying that you have to make friends, but I'm saying that you should be open to the possibility, because there's going to come a time where you're going to have to trust your colleagues to have your back. And that's a lot easier to do when you actually trust them.
It took a few seconds for Hitoshi to realize that Aizawa had already started walking again, and he had to jog to catch up. What was that? Eraserhead was known to be independent and harsh. He didn't have friends, did he? He didn't need them. At least, That's what Hitoshi had always believed, but that's not what Aizawa had said. Hitoshi frowned. Maybe he should be more open, but maybe he could test it out. He hadn't come here to make friends, but allies would be undeniably useful. So he'd start with Midoriya, and then if that didn't work out, he would never have to do it again. That would work. Aizawa led him to a nondescript building in one of the poorer parts of town, just a neighborhood or two away from UA. He pulled out a key and let Hitoshi inside.
Welcome to my agency, kid. That door's the bathroom. Get into your hero costume and meet me in the gym at the end of the hall. We need to see where your combat abilities are at.
Hitoshi nodded and hurried to get dressed. Izuku frowned at a key and piece of paper that Nezu had given to him during their last lesson. The paper was supposed to be an address, but apparently Nezu had decided that the best way to start his internship was with a riddle. Izuku wasn't complaining. He liked riddles. He just wished he didn't have to drag around his luggage while trying to find where Nezu lived. It would just have to count as muscle training, right? Oh, and the riddle was in English, so there was that. Though I am only 2 words, I have thousands of letters. 2 words? Thousands of letters? Maybe it had something to do with the longest word in the English language? A quick internet search later, and Izuku was back to square one. The longest word referred to some kind of lung disease, but he didn't think that was quite what Nezu was going for. Well, a lot of riddles relied on puns or wordplay. Was this Nezu's way of telling him not to slack off in Mike's class? Okay, words didn't have 2 meanings, nor did thousands, so maybe letters? Letters were characters in English writing, but they must have another meaning as well. He hoped that Nezu wouldn't get too mad at him for running the word through his translate app, but he was just using all his resources, right? And there, letters were also what was sent in the mail. So, 2 words, thousands of letters, post office. Izuku grinned and started towards Matsudafu post office. He wondered what Nezu would have waiting for him there, because obviously that wasn't his final destination. Was this going to be a full-on scavenger hunt? He looked at the key again. Yeah, that seemed like something Nezu would do. When he reached the post office, Izuku looked around for his next clue, but didn't see anything obvious. He could always ask the people at the desk, but he didn't know if Nezu would have wanted to include other people on his hunt. Izuku pinched his lip as he thought about what Nezu might have in mind. What had he given him? Just the note, and Izuku looked over towards the P.O. boxes, then grabbed the key from his pocket. Sure enough, there was a number engraved on the handle. 209. Izuku found the right box and turned the key, smiling slightly when he heard the lock click. He opened the door and grabbed what was inside. A puzzle box. He locked the P.O. box again and made his way outside, where he could find a bench to sit on while he figured out how to open it. Maybe if he moved that piece to the left, then that other piece down, then... It took him almost 20 minutes to solve the box, which he hoped wasn't too much longer than Nezu had predicted. He didn't want to disappoint his mentor when Nezu had been so eager to have him for internships. But maybe he'd planned on it taking that long. The first riddle had been pretty easy, so Nezu had probably put in a variety of different difficulties. The only thing inside the puzzle box was a note written on the same stationery as the first clue, and Izuku realized that it was another riddle. There is a place we go for a walk. The children play, and we can talk. Find this place if you want to lark, The answer you seek is in there. At the train station, Shoto had heard a few of his classmates worrying they'd get lost on the way to their internships. He didn't have that issue, considering that he was just going home. He'd been hesitant to intern with his father, but if he was going to use his flames, he needed to learn how to use them, and his father was the best flame user in Japan. But just because he decided that this was the best option didn't mean he was necessarily looking forward to this week. Especially the training. Endeavor was already waiting for him when he arrived, so Shoto changed into his workout clothes as quickly as he could and made his way to the training room. He opted for a tank top and shorts this time, since he would be practicing his fire rather than his ice, which meant that between his flames and his father's, it would most likely get very hot, very quickly. He took a deep breath and opened the door. It would only be 1 week.
I'm glad you've finally come to your senses, Shoto. Endeavor grinned. This week will be invaluable when it comes to making sure your fire is even stronger than your ice.
Shoto grit his teeth. Leave it to his father to start off his hell week by implying that he was better than his mom. Shoto took a deep breath. Mom had given him permission to use his fire again. He was doing this to make her proud. He just had to remember that.
Let's begin by seeing how long you can keep your flames up before you pass out from the heat.
Endeavor continued. He got out his phone and showed Shoto the screen. It was on the stopwatch function.
Begin!
Katsuki walked towards the building, which looked like it had been repaired so many times that the workers had stopped trying to match the exact shade of paint. And he rang the bell. There was a long moment without any response, and Katsuki was considering knocking the door down when there was a yell from the inside.
Come the fuck in!
He rolled his eyes, but slammed the door open. Inside, there was one large room with a few couches, a TV, and a set of stairs leading to the upper levels. Midoko was lounging on one of the couches playing on her phone, and didn't even bother to look up when he came in. Katsuki stood in the doorway for a moment before stomping over to stand right in front of her.
Yo, bunny bitch, you gonna train me or what?
Midoko grinned and tossed her phone down on the couch.
I guess that depends, Blasty. You gonna make me?
Katsuki looked at her in shock. Hadn't she been the one that requested him? Was she not gonna do her damn job? Midoko picked her phone back up.
And here I thought you had some fight in you. May as well go back to middle school if you're gonna turn down a fight. Heroes have gotta be willing to throw down any time.
Katsuki scowled and took off his blazer.
If Bunny Bitch wanted a fight, she was gonna get a damn fight.
He screamed and threw an explosive punch at her phone, but she managed to react quickly enough so his explosion only hit air.
Now that's what I'm talking about, Blasty.
She grinned and stood, cracking her neck.
Now let's see if you can handle this.
She aimed a kick at his stomach, which Katsuki dodged using his explosions. As soon as he landed, he turned to counterattack, but was met with a kick to the back instead.
Lesson number 1. Never take your eyes off an enemy, especially not one who's better than you, Midoko said. And stop making your movements so obvious. You're taking all the fun out of it.
Katsuki grimaced as he peeled himself off the wall and saw the sizable dent his body had left. He was starting to realize why this place had been repaired so many times.
I'm gonna make you pay for that, bunny bitch.
Midoko laughed.
I'll believe that when I see it, Blasty. Right now, you're getting your ass handed to you.
Katsuki grinned as he dodged another kick, and immediately landed an explosion at Miruko's face. This week was gonna be awesome. Mirio hoped he was in the right place. He swore that this was the address All Might gave him, but maybe he just wasn't reading it right? Gran Torino was a hero. Retired, yes, but still a hero. So he couldn't live in such a run-down place, right? Hesitantly, he knocked on the door, only for it to open on its own like the opening of a bad horror movie. Okay. He could go completely intangible, so he could probably avoid getting murdered if he went inside. Hopefully. Mirio slowly opened the door and waited for his eyes to adjust to the darkness of the room. Okay, so the inside was a little better maintained than the outside had been, and... oh no. He froze when he saw a short old man in a white cape lying face down in a puddle of what looked suspiciously like blood. Oh no, Gran Torino was dead. All Might was going to be so sad, and what would Sir think? Had he been close to Gran Torino as well? Mirio took a deep breath and forced himself to move forward. He was going to be a hero. He could handle this. He thought back to his crisis management classes from second year. First off, he should check for signs of life. Then call the police. He crouched down to check for a pulse, only to scream and fall on his butt when the body suddenly raised its head and smiled. I'm alive! Mirio stared at him for a moment before bursting into laughter. All Might never mentioned you were a prankster too. Gran Torino got off the floor and helped him up.
Probably because Toshinori's too embarrassed for falling for so many back in the day. Kid's got a good heart, but he's kind of an idiot sometimes. Now, go get me a mop and help me clean up this ketchup.
Mirio grinned and went to find the kitchen. This guy's prank game was so on point that he managed to convince a third-year hero student that he was dead. But Mirio could only freak people out if they didn't know his quirk yet. Gran Torino was a master of the craft, and Mirio got to spend an entire week learning from him. This was going to be so much fun. Izuku read through all the clues again, wondering if he missed something somewhere. The last clue had led him to an apartment building, which seemed correct, but he had no way of knowing which apartment was Nezu's. Was he supposed to knock on every door and ask where the principal lived? Considering that he was probably the only animal living here, the neighbors almost definitely knew which apartment was his. But that couldn't be what Nezu had in mind. He looked through the clues again. Most of them were riddles, with the exception of the P.O. box key. Wait, a key! A key with a number on it. Which number was it again? Izuku dug in his pocket and looked at the handle. 209. It might not mean anything, but he'd known Nezu for long enough that he knew that he rarely did something for no reason. It would be just like Nezu to hide a clue in a random object that would likely be dismissed as already fulfilled its purpose. Izuku climbed the stairs to the second floor and knocked on the door to the apartment 209. There was a long moment, and Izuku had already started drafting his apology to the actual resident of the apartment when the door finally opened. Oh, Midoriya. Perfect timing. Nezu grinned and stepped aside to let him in. Dinner is almost ready. Hey, it's Mika. If you enjoyed this podfic, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel or following me on Spotify for updates and new content weekly. Also, consider supporting me on Ko-Fi, link in the description. Anyways, I hope that you have a great day or night, and that your favorite author posts the exact fanfiction you visualized when you were meant to be doing work yesterday. Until next time.